We have a big program tonight, including new video evidence emerging from the Capitol riot. It shows the officer who died when he was attacked with very dangerous chemical spray. Later tonight, we have another one of our special reports. This one we've been working on has some good news for Biden. It's about some common mistakes in Washington about so-called bipartisanship. But we begin tonight with breaking news on the border. There is brand new video from inside the Carrizo Springs HHS facility down in Texas. This houses over 750 minors right now. NBC News' Gabe Gutierrez is the only journalist who was allowed inside today, and he joins us momentarily. What he captured was an HHS intake facility. There are tables with clothes and shoes lined up. There's staff and children moving about the site. The facility is near capacity. And this focus on the border comes as President Biden is facing his own version of the immigration challenge. Over 9,000 unaccompanied children detained at the border. Now, on a month-to-month basis, this is up 63% from just last month. And today, the new president tapping the vice president to oversee solutions.
I think the best thing to do is to put someone who, when he or she speaks, they don't have to wonder about, is that where the president is? When she speaks for me.
If this all feels familiar, it is for many reasons. Number one, some of the international issues from Central America up to Mexico with immigration have been going on for many years. Number two, of course, there's recent history, immigration being a key fault line in the last administration, and Biden not beating around the bush, saying quite bluntly, as this becomes center stage, that this humanitarian crisis began with Donald Trump.
This new surge we're dealing with now started with the last administration, but it's our responsibility to deal with it humanely and to stop what's happening.
There can be political blame, and then there's also facts. As journalists, we want to make sure you understand everything we can gather about this. Immigration is complex. If you've seen our reporting, you may have heard me discuss that before. When the Biden administration, though, says that the Trump administration is part of the problem, well, NBC News has reporting on all of this, including the fact that Biden officials, many of whom have deep government experience, were sounding the alarm in December in the transition about what they were getting from the Trump administration, including a disturbing lack of shelter space for these migrant children. And there's records that it was brought up in several meetings, multiple times a week. One Biden official saying Trump's people were just sitting on their hands. Biden and Harris now, though, are in charge. The buck stops with them, even if it's accurate to say the problems predate them. Now, apprehensions of unaccompanied minors overall at the border, as mentioned, are on the rise. So that is part of why this is in the news tonight and remains an issue. When you stack it all up, though, with Republicans trying to say this is a new Biden problem, well, they're still lower currently than the peak in 2019 under the Trump administration, despite policies that Trump pledged would change that border flow. Joining us now is the aforementioned NBC News' Gabe Gutierrez, who was inside this facility late today, Erica Andiola, Chief Advocacy Officer for Races, and Jason Johnson, Politics and Journalism Professor at Morgan State University. Gabe, what do you see in your eyewitness reporting?
Hey there, Ari. Well, I should tell you, first of all, the children we saw in there were calm. They were in good spirits. We saw them walking around, milling about, many of them playing soccer. But I should point out, for some context here, Ari, for those that may not be too familiar with the border, there are several different kinds of facilities here at the border. This was an HHS facility run by the Department of Health and Human Services and also a nonprofit here. That is different than the CBP, Customs and Border Protection facilities that we've been hearing about for the last couple of days, overcrowded conditions, the handout video, the pictures that we've been seeing there. This is the next step in the process when the kids are brought here. Now, I can give you some numbers. Right now in this facility in Carrizo Springs, Texas, 766 unaccompanied minors right now. The highest they have been is 800. They have a total capacity here of 952. Now, why aren't they at capacity? They have to set aside some beds for COVID-positive kids and negative air pressure and isolation. Those are some of the beds. I should point out, Artie, 108 of the children that are currently here right now have tested positive for COVID-19, but they test positive when they arrive. It's not like they're getting COVID from other children inside the compound. Now, Now, we came here for about a 2-hour tour. There were White House officials. There were also there was a congressional delegation here, 5 members of Congress that came here and toured it. We start out going to the intake center. This is where the children are brought in. They're given a duffel bag, a hygiene kit. They're also given a medical screening as well. We saw this medical area where they have their temperatures taken, again, COVID tests as well. There's also certain trailers set aside for these children to have legal representation. Right now, they're doing it virtually in most cases, where they may speak with nonprofit or pro bono lawyers as well. We also were shown the dormitories. That's where they sleep 4 to a room in bunk beds. We then also saw many of them playing soccer. It's about 80 degrees here in Carrizo Springs. When it gets hotter in the next couple of months, they'll limit some of that outdoor activity. But right now, they're let outside multiple times a day. Breakfast is at 7 a.m. Then they have 6 hours of education. We saw one of the classrooms as well. And they right now are virtual learning because of COVID. The kids were wearing masks. Some of them, an interesting thing that I saw, the kids here are 13 to 17 years old. They are males, no girls here in this facility, which is different, actually, Ari, from when we visited here back in 2019. We actually came to this facility in 2019 and were given a tour back then. And this facility was shut down back then, just several weeks later, by the Trump administration. Now, we did ask the Biden administration about access. They've been asking, reporters have been asking for access now for several weeks. But they said that they are trying to ramp up their bed space, not just here, but in other parts throughout the country, and they hope to give more access as this moves forward, Ari.
Gabe Gutierrez reporting on the ground all day, and I know you have more work to do as the night goes on. So thank you for joining us. I want to bring in the rest of our panel. And Erica, take a listen to how Republicans have been seizing on this issue as it hits the Biden administration.
This crisis at the border, which was incentivized, President Biden and his minions created an environment causing this surge.
This crisis is created by the presidential policies of this new administration. There's no other way to claim it than a Biden border crisis.
These sites are a direct result of President Biden's reckless open border policies.
Erica, you're well-versed in these issues, perhaps more than even some of these politicians. Walk us through your view of what is actually happening.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And we actually are the attorneys in those trailers that Gabe talked about. We represent kids at Carrizo Springs right now. We have our attorneys are actually the pro bono attorneys who are seeing kids every single day, providing Know Your Rights presentations, intake forms, anything that we can do to support their cases. And so we have seen this. And this is the important thing to know. This is nothing new. And this is why it's so frustrating to see the narrative of the crisis, a surge. I mean, all these dehumanizing, first of all, words that people are using to describe what's happening at the border when it happens every single year. And us as attorneys, I'm not an attorney, but I work with many other ones who provide the services to these kids. We literally expect every single year to have a higher number of children we have to represent over, before the summer. So there is a period of time when we do this. And so it's just really frustrating that right now, the reason why it's being called a crisis and all this is because Republicans are trying to use it as a political weapon, right, to try to win, I don't know what, elections or whatever they're trying to do.
Yeah, and Jason, immigration is complicated for sure, especially legally, because you have these different categories of individuals, minors, families, which country of origin, whether they may or may not qualify for refugee status. But big picture, I want to put up on the screen, the majority of voters in America, having heard about this for years and definitely heard both sides. I mean, the Trump version of the issue has been presented, but 69% of people support a path to citizenship for the people who are already here. As I say, that's only one part of the category. But at a time of other polarization, and this does relate to race and other associations perhaps for some people, it does suggest that the Biden-Harris approach has more backing, at least from the public.
Well, Ari, that's been the case for a long time. It's not just we're a country of immigrants, except for black people who are dragged here against our will. But I mean, it's Hamilton. You know, it's immigrants. They get the job done. Most people actually are fairly open to the idea of men and women who want to come to this country and work. I don't think it should be missed that when INS raids places, they're not raiding parks, they're raiding places where people are working, because people who come to this country tend to want to work.
Right.
But what we have happening right now is a rhetorical battle where Republicans are trying to blame Joe Biden for something that has been going on for decades. And I want to point this out because I think this is critical, because it's used for blame when they show sort of out of context clips from Joe Biden. Look, if I'm trying to escape Guatemala, if I'm trying to get out of Brazil, if I'm concerned about drug wars happening in southern parts of Mexico, would I try to escape to the United States under a Trump administration or a Biden administration? I would probably try more during the Biden administration because I think at least I would get a hearing. That's not the same thing as Joe Biden having open borders. That's Joe Biden caring about a humanitarian crisis that existed before he got into office. So that's what I see as happening here. And again, I think most people in America, they assume that people who are coming here to work. And if you don't think that, it's probably because you're a racist to begin with.
Well, strong words, but I hear you. I mean, Erica, to simplify hundreds of years of immigration law, you can say that the main mechanisms that we welcome immigrants are because they help us or because they need help. The vast majority of legal immigration is because they help us. And there's been ebb and flow, but it's the idea that we need these workers, we need these inventors, we need these tech companies, all of this. And so there's a deal there, but it really does help America, and the laws are written that way. The help them is, as mentioned by Jason, if somebody really is fleeing torture or fleeing attacks in their home country, we also have laws that provide for them and for children to sometimes get that status. Now, it starts out helping them. They may still become very productive members of society. I'm simplifying into those two rationales to show you some of what the Biden White House has been talking about. Jen Psaki talking about children who may need help and the balance they're trying to strike. Take a listen.
These Border Patrol facilities are not places made for children. They are not places that we want children to be staying for an extended period of time. Our alternative is to send children back on this treacherous journey. That is not, in our view, the right choice to make.
How do you think they are doing living up to that standard? Because even as Gabe told us what he did see, let's be clear, we haven't gotten access as journalists or the public into some of the other first-order facilities.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're talking about asylum, right? Asylum is legal, and this is something that people have to understand. Coming into this country and saying, I am afraid for my life if I go back to whatever country I'm coming from, that is a legal thing to do, and people have been trying to do that for many, many years. Now, right now, the Biden administration is turning away adults and families because of something called Title 42, and it's allowing children to be able to stay, right? Now, we as Raíces are pushing for people who are adults and families to be able to ask for asylum as well, because they should have that right to do so. Now, I do want to point out that what it is important for us to understand, and the reason why I said that this happens every single year, some years is higher than others, is that we have neglected to be ready to receive people and welcome people seeking asylum. And I'm be using this phrase a lot today and yesterday, is that we have chosen to send Rambo to the border instead of sending Mother Teresa, right? We are sending more and more money for Border Patrol, for militarization to the border, and I can, go on, instead of figuring out how do we create that infrastructure that can welcome people so we don't have to open these kinds of reception centers or detention centers for children that, pop up every now and then. And we can actually have the ability to receive them, to welcome them, to process their asylum cases and release them to their families as soon as possible, which is very crucial. I know the Biden administration is, trying to face this challenge with children. And I hope that they are, really planning to close down these places as soon as they are able to reunite as many people, as many kids as possible. But in the future, as we look ahead, we have to create a system to welcome people and not to continue to enforce the border with more and more militarization, because it hasn't worked. That's why we have people coming every single year, and it hasn't stopped. It's just the way it is.
Erica Andiola and Jason Johnson kicking us off tonight. I want to thank you.